Hi, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening to this podcast. This is the Encouraging Women podcast, and I'm Yvonne van der Hof. I'll be hosting this podcast, and this specific one is for homeschooling. So those of you who are interested in homeschooling, and even if you're not interested at the moment, you never know. Please listen to this podcast and enjoy it with us. My guests that are here with me is Erin Teal and Adina Jacobs. Welcome. I don't know if you quickly want to say a nice welcome.
Yes, thank you for having us. I'm very excited about this.
Yes, I'm also very excited to be here and just share the journey.
I want to hear more about what both of you are doing. And also because more than ever, because so many of my grandchildren are being homeschooled. So this is a second generation. I'm meeting more people that are very intrigued. And so I couldn't be happier that the education of our children is more and more parents are seeing it's their responsibility. And because they're the ones that are going to pick up the pieces, if there's a lack in education or if they educate them in things and morals that they're going to be the ones having to deal with it all their lives, once the schools are done, if they turn rebellion or they, no longer believe in God, there's a lot at stake. So I think it's a wonderful what's happening. And I'm glad to be part of, helping the next generation homeschool.
Even growing up, I don't know about you, Adina, but even growing up for me, homeschool was never mentioned. It wasn't an option. I didn't know any children in my immediate vicinity that was homeschooling. In fact, I think it was like when you said homeschool, everyone would raise their eyebrows. But now, in the last few years, it's really become something popular in our country as well.
I think it was the benefit of the lockdowns. I mean, there's so many things that were awful about it, but because we operate in all things work together for good, if you love God, you're called according to his purpose. So what's his purpose for that? And then you see these things like that, homeschooling. And a lot of people experienced homeschool, which wasn't homeschool. It's not, when you're forced to do it, it's, put on you and all these, and get on the Zoom and all these things. That's not homeschool, though you had to kind of take over. So those parents, but a lot came away with, oh, I want to do this, They saw, how beneficial it was to have their children around and things. So that was a good thing. But like that, I mean, in our time with my children, so I'm trying to think, you both are well, I know, Yvonne, you're just a couple years older than my oldest son. But at that time, even we had a huge homeschool group in Pensacola, Florida. And even there, people would look like, and people would question me, oh, that's against the law. Like, no, it's not. There's 200 families in Pensacola that homeschool, So even then it continues, people, it's just one of those things that that's probably a topic we should address. How do the people who come against you and all the different things, I get it all the time when I mention about homeschooling, but yeah, it was never talked about. And when did it become legal? It was before the lockdown, correct?
Yes, it's always been legal in South Africa.
Oh, it has.
Yes. I think they're just trying to legal, or not legalize, but to make more rules surrounding it. But it's always been legal in South Africa to homeschool your children.
Yes.
So it's just that you need to follow the curriculum. There's like curriculums that you need to follow. So you cannot teach they still need to go through the exams and things like that. So it is a bit different, but it's still
there's a benefit to that versus, and I know we were going to first introduce ourselves and say about how we started homeschooling. So maybe we'll come back to that benefit and curriculum and things, because having been a motivational speaker for homeschooling for so many years, not in another country, only United States, but in a few states, speaking in, because each state is like our own country, so there's different laws and what you can do. But curriculum is always the biggest fearful challenge, as a homeschooling parent, just from speaking to groups, that were coming to, I would do an introduction to homeschooling and I would talk about it, but that was the question that they had, because sometimes freedom like that, you can create any curriculum you want. That's overwhelming, just like homeschooling, because you can do whatever you want. You can start when you want, you can end when you want, but freedom comes with a lot of responsibility as well. And some would rather just put them on the school bus, it's just too much. Yeah. It's too much. It's too overwhelming. So doing that, but I didn't realize until we were kind of talking about having this meeting that, the Lord is so good, because he took care of that for me, because my children were in private school, and in a private school, you have to, at the time when I pulled them out, and it was always, how a crisis always comes up, that's how he answers our prayers most often. It's not when you expect it. But when we pulled them out, because we bought all the textbooks, all the workbooks, all the school supplies, everything just came home with them. And so I had everything, and it was just a matter of doing it with the boys. I had the 2 boys. And so that was taking care, was for me. And we followed that same curriculum from that school, where most the private Christian schools use the same curriculum. We used that for a long time. But then I was able to start saying, well, I'd like to try this or that for this subject of school. So anyway, but why don't I turn it back to you? I'll stop talking, and then you can go ahead and introduce yourself and when you started homeschooling or whatever, and I'll turn the hosting back to you.
Thank you so much. So ladies, you can see how much there's coming up. So there's so many topics regarding homeschooling. You would never imagine it until you start it. So Adina, let me start with you, because I do want to hear from you, Erin, because I do remember you were homeschooling all your children. I'm going to go to Adina now, and then I'm going to come back to you.
Yes,
so
Adina, I'm interested, because I don't remember everything, or I may not have even heard. So I'm very interested in hearing too.
Yes, so please, Adina, tell us, how did homeschooling start for you?
Okay, so for me, also like you shared, Yvonne, growing up, I never even knew about homeschooling. I think for me, the first time I really got to know anything about homeschooling was when I found RMI. Maybe I've heard about it before, but you hear, but it didn't made any impact on me, because I thought this is not for me. But during the lockdown, when we had to homeschool, slowly the Lord placed the desire in my heart. But because I do not have like primary custody, I do have shared custody. I cannot make decisions on my own.
I think that's with most. So I think we're good at that and knowing that, because that's a big factor. It's not just outside. I mean, there's extended families, but when you're a mom and you want to have that, and you have a husband who thinks it's crazy or whatever, it's very difficult in navigating it. And it's good in a way, because God has to move.
Yes.
And that's basically what he did in my situation, because after the lockdown, over the next two or 3 years, the desire became stronger. And then the custody case was brought against me. And maybe on my side, it was a bit of, trying to navigate through the custody as well, I suggested homeschooling. But my former husband didn't want to know anything about it. So I just left it at that. But I did give it to the Lord and my beloved heavenly husband. And I just said to him, if it's his will, then, you know, he will have to make it happen, because I'm not going to mention it again or talk about it. But yeah, I just left it up to him. And then that was during that year that I was a weekend mom and didn't have full custody. I think it was quite at the end of that, because they were away for about a year and 2-3 months that I was a weekend mom, if I can put it like that. My former husband did come to me and he said he wants to homeschool the children. I nearly fell on my back, because, you know, this was not me. And that it
what
was
a shock would have been for you. Oh my gosh. I'm going to plug your book, because I have been enjoying doing a little proofreading before it goes to print. But your Restoring Custody is just tremendous. I haven't gotten that far. I mean, in your book, you know, to really hear it and see it written. But I would encourage every mother to have that, because you never know, you know, just like who would have ever thought we would all become friends and have the same journey, the restoration journey that we all started, you know. I just started off a little ahead of everybody, but who would have ever thought that? And custody is such a important thing. And even for other family members, everybody should know to help, because it's just such an important topic. But that's a really good book in that. And hearing these details, I just think the hopelessness that you had to have felt and experienced and went through, and to see it on the other side is so encouraging. You know, I want to hear it, because I'm sure I'll run into young moms and or grandparents, whatever, you know, that I can share your testimony. So I want to hear the rest of it, because you were still finishing.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So, but the only problem when he now said, okay, he wants to homeschool the children because of, you know, everything that's going on in schools, and he wants to give the children more like a Christian upbringing, was the fact that we weren't staying in the same town, because as I shared in my novel, I was trusting the Lord to make a way. If it was his will for me to move back to this town, then he would make a way. So then, you know,
I think you said is it about, like, here it's like 60 miles or like an hour trip in between when you were apart, when your children, when you were the weekend mom, at about an hour drive? Is that?
No, it was about, that was when initially when the custody started, he wanted me to go and live with my brother. That was like an hour's drive away. But then the Lord softened his heart for me to stay in the town I was staying in, and that was about 30 minutes away. Where they were, this town where we are staying now. So yeah, and everything just fell into place, and we found a place here, and I moved here, and then, but it was in June, so it was half last year during midway through the year. So we couldn't just pull the kids out of school then. So they did still complete last year, the school year in the private school that they were in. And then we started homeschooling this year.
So, and when does your school year officially, because you, compared to the United States, it seems like your school, and I think I read something, you school like basically all year long, you know, where we have well, ours is September to June is always where it was. And then in the Midwest, where there were like fields and things, they needed the children to help with the harvesting, and so they would move it sooner. And so it would be, so it's like mid-August is when ours goes from there, and then it will end before the end of May, you know. And it depends on if it's snowy, you know, they'll have snow days, so they have to add those onto the days, you know, that sort of thing, because they have to have a certain amount of days. But when is yours actually officially start? After the New Year's? That's what I read, or I don't know.
Yes, January, and then it up
that
until
makes more sense, to be honest. Start a new school, start a new year.
Until
It's just
December.
so hard. Yeah. Ours is more confusing. Yeah, I like that.
But we do have we have like, it's like in 4 terms, and then you have 4 holidays. They have short breaks between the terms. So yeah, that's, like I said, this is now our first year, so it's still a lot of ups and downs and a learning curve for me, but I have my beloved
It never stops, just so you know, because their age is different. We already spoke before this meeting started that there's new laws that are coming into place. It always changes, you know, and even our own family life, because that plays a part, you know, in it. So yeah, it's always changing, and that's a good thing. You know, we think it's not, because we like, you know, routine and just everything staying the same, but it just means that we have to, you know, trust the Lord even more. You know, you have to talk to your best friend more, which is a good thing, right? You know, I don't know why we shrink from it, because we know it's a good thing, but we still, that's our initial human reaction, you know, but it is a good thing. But it is always evolving, just so you know. I mean, from the moment, you know, I started homeschooling all the way through all the years, you know, but I'm going to leave off so you can finish, and then Hala, you can, sorry.
Yeah, I think I've shared my testimony.
Thank you. Thank you so much for sharing that, Edina. What a beautiful testimony. And yes, like Erin said, you know, it just keeps on changing, because when we went from grade 9 to grade 10 now for Owen, it just was such a big change, right? It was like enormous change for us. It feels like I'm starting homeschooling again, you know? So Erin, I would like to hear from you, because I know I read somewhere that there was a time where you homeschooled all your children at one time, right? It must have been, I mean,
I think I'm trying to, and now I have to really think if there was ever a time. I don't think so, because there's a 16-year, so mine, should I start at the beginning and just do? Yeah.
Yes, please.
So, okay. So I had already said that we had our children we moved to a new town, and we had our children in a Christian school. It was the only available one. There wasn't anything else. So that had to be part of the equation too, for this all to happen, or it probably wouldn't. But God knew, you know, He set me up, backed me into the corner, and that was the only way. And so something kind of horrific happened at the school that I found out about. God had protected my children from it, but immediately there was no question, like, get them out, okay? Get them out of there, you know, so they're not around what's going on. So we pulled them out. We got all their books, came home. I played school, and I think that's part of it too. That's another part where things change and evolve and change all the time. But we set up a little school in our garage. So it was in Florida. So it was just pleasant enough in the garage. And because I had 2 boys, one had started the 2nd grade, one had started kindergarten. And so I think I even bought some desks, but they had desks, you know, and we set up a little classroom. I had a big, and we already had a chalkboard. You know, we taped an American flag to the chalkboard, you know, and I think we did the Pledge of Allegiance, which is our, you know, everybody has their national anthem kind of thing. And it was rather fun, you know, I mean, you know, we play, you know, kind of a plain thing. And the other thing is because I had a 2 and a 4-year-old there. So they were told, and I taped it off, that they could not come into the classroom, you know, like, don't cross this line. you can come and they could stay around the back of them. So it wasn't distracting for the other children, you know? So we did that. And it happened to be that I had a washer and dryer there. And even my ironing board was out there, like a kind of a step up, I guess, so they could put the plumbing in. But I had, my clothes stayed clean like crazy. It was so easy to do because the laundry was right there, constantly doing it. But they stayed in their seats. They raised their hand. We went from one subject to another, you know, tutoring. I enjoyed myself immensely. And then it ended up that Dallas, who my oldest, which the shock is that he finished all of his curriculum before Christmas. So now we started September into December, and he finished everything. And I'm like, what are they doing in there? But I knew that it was a problem and a challenge from the time he was in school, because he would go so quickly and they couldn't keep him busy enough, you know? So we ended up buying the next year, and then the next year and the next year. And he just kept going from one grade to another, you know, which is kind of, I think most people know Montessori. That is where they just go at their pace. Anyway, but we just kept buying the curriculum. On the other hand, which we had already noticed because I was a good friend, his teacher, the kindergarten teacher, was actually the pastor's wife of the church we were attending. But we already noticed, because my son Axel has genius IQ. They knew right at 2 weeks old that he had a genius IQ, and it runs in my family. No, it didn't hit me, I don't believe. Though I've heard rumors to the effect, but I don't believe it. I think they must have tested me wrong. But I have brothers that are definitely geniuses, and so it's in them. However, he had learning problems, and we could tell right away because the other kids were getting it and he couldn't, and that didn't make any sense, you know. And I had this teacher too. So she said, yeah, there's something going on there. Anyway, so he was struggling, and long story short, he couldn't read until he was 11. But in the first year, he read the encyclopedias. When he first finally learned to read, he went from a non-reader to reading all the encyclopedias. We had a set. And then the next year he read it through twice. So, and can retain all of it too. So that always gave a lot when I used to, you know, speak at homeschool conventions. That was always very hopeful for them. You know, you just never know. But so we started, and then we ended up, and that was when my restoration journey kind of began there. We ended up moving, and so things very much changed. Then it was just me with the children. We were still in the state of Florida, but I was living by my parents. I was a single mom. I homeschooled there, and it changed. We weren't playing, you know, we didn't have the room for a school room, so it was just at the dining room table like most. So we did the homeschooling there. But fast forwarding, so then after that's after my restoration, then we moved into a house, and then, like you said, I started homeschooling more. So I had the 4 that were all school age that were sitting at our dining room table. And then when Tara came along, you know, it was her in the high chair. You couldn't trust her to just put her down. Never, ever, you know, you wouldn't. When parents do that, I think, are you crazy? You know, do you know the kind of things that could happen, you know, here? Not happening. So she was either in a high chair on my lap. I did not have the children when they were homeschooling, and they never had to have a baby on their lap or anything. That isn't one of the things. I mean, not that you couldn't do that, but I just thought, I just want to make sure that they can concentrate. So it was on my lap, in a high chair, or the playpen came when then I had Cooper. And so then I had Tara and Cooper, and they were in, I vividly remember pulling that up so that Tara could stand and kind of color or something on, you know, and use the corner of the table to do things. Cooper was just sitting and then pulling himself up, and then she would sit down and play, but I'd keep them pinned up in that playpen, you know. There was a time when everybody thought that was horrible, pinning them up, but now they have the pack and play, so people are more come to their senses. And then I always had a high chair there. And then at one point, and then I was pregnant with Macy. So all three of them, and then the four at the table. And I was like, wow, this is really something. But as I said, Dallas kept going on to the next curriculum. And then finally he finished high school, but when Macy was just a baby, just born, because before he was 16, before she was even born, he finished school. Wow. And then he was asked to go to the School of Ministry, which caused a big, I don't know why my life has always done these kinds of things, but this big mega church that we're having this revival, they said he has to have a GED, but I didn't believe in having that. I thought, why? If he can do the work, I didn't want to have that. Anyway, there was this big, I don't know, a revolution there because of this revival that was going on, which would go way into the night and past midnight, that most of the people on staff and on the choir and everything, and the pastoral staff all homeschooled their children because they couldn't keep up with this, so they were all homeschooling. Well, he became kind of the poster boy for it. And they said either let him in on the merits, his own merit, or we're all going to leave, or we're something like that. I was just like, oh my goodness. Anyway, he was accepted into it, but now he's just a 16-year-old in a college, it was a School of Ministry is what it was, and stuff. So anyway, so as far as homeschooling there, I don't think he lasted very long. I don't think he enjoyed it. It was kind of an experimental kind of thing. I think it's still going to this day. I don't know what kind of reputation, but anyway, he did do that. But he started doing more of computers, and he went into what he likes, to do and things. And then Axel ended up officially graduating because, like I said, this church that we were involved in had so many homeschoolers that they had a graduation ceremony, and I want to say there were like 20, which is pretty big, and they had the cap and gowns. It was held at the church, and so he had the most graduation kind of ceremony, because that's another thing for parents when they finish homeschooling, then what do they do, and it was different for each one. I think we were in another church in Missouri by that time, when Easton, and they had something for all the graduates that they could wear their caps and gowns and then be acknowledged in a church service and things. So that was good for him. He had his cap and gown, and he was part of that. And Tyler had something similar. Tara didn't do any of it, but every one was different. Every single one was different. In total, I did, to prepare for today, that I homeschooled 20 years.
Wow.
So that I do have a little bit of experience.
Yes.
And of course, each child is so different, where I had a brilliant, what better to have a child like, he has a photographic memory, we found out. So if he saw a scripture verse and he just looked at it, and then he would read over it, and then he could put it aside and just quote it word for word without missing a word, because he was looking at it really in his head, And then if he tested me, I'd be off one word and he'd correct me. I'd say, it's not that big of a deal. It's not, it doesn't matter if it's or the. And he goes, no, Mom, it is it's the, and I'm like, okay, let me try it again. I was like, I can't do it. But anyway, but then you have the other extreme with someone who's brilliant. So he needs to be fed things, but he was great at memorizing. When he heard things, he could, but just navigating when you have learning problems. I do not believe, to this day, I don't know that I will ever change, not to label them, do not test them. They will peg them. And every child is unique. It says we're beautifully, wonderfully made. We're unique. Our fingerprints are unique. They're nothing the same. Therefore, even any learning problems, it's going to vary so many things. And the other thing is that just because you diagnose it, they don't give you the solution. So and they're going to try and get them to do what might work for something else. You know, it's just never a good idea to ever do that. And it's very hard though, because hey, this is our society. It's natural to go to be diagnosed, to get that. Everybody's asking, oh, so did they have this? Oh, do they have this? You know, they always want to do that. They want to do it with my grandchildren. Oh, is it that? Oh, does she have that? And I'm like, well, you know, there isn't one, you know, there isn't one, because she's unique. She's different, and we have to navigate through it. Plus, as they grow, as they change, you know, we're learning, they're learning. But what it does do is it creates such a wonderful relationship with the one you have to depend on, you know. And it's when we're apart from him, we really can do nothing, or nothing worthwhile, or nothing that amounts to anything. So it really was, you know, such a blessing to have that challenge and having to be able to do it and navigating. But there were times when I would just cry out, you know, if he doesn't learn to read, he'll never be able to read the Bible. Lord, are you listening? You know, that was my thing. Aren't you listening? Time is going by. I mean, that's 5 years from when a child should learn to read, about 6. So some of them started reading at 4. So you think about that. 11 that's a long time. And then finally, when it finally clicked and he was able to read it, and then starting out, even there, how the Lord gave me the wisdom to have him go and read these readers, because he's a 11-year-old. I mean, a reader is for a little kid, and the stories are for a little kid, you know. But I would ask him to go and read, and he had 3 children to sit and read to, that were just spellbound. They just wanted, you know how children are, they just want you to read to them. So he would sit on the bed. I can still see them. He'd sit on the bed. There'd be 2 on one side and 1 on the other, or 1 in his lap, and he would read to them, and they would fall asleep. So reading, and bless his heart, I would be around the corner. I'd peek. I didn't want him to know I was listening, because I knew he was self-conscious, and the more self-conscious, the more he stuttered as well. But he just started reading and went through all of those, and lo and behold, became an amazing orator. There's nobody you enjoy talking to. He doesn't have stutter. He had 2 lisps, 2 different speech impediments. Doesn't have any of those, none of those things, all of them. And it was God who did it. No experts, you know. I'm certainly not an expert, other than the mother knowing that he had all the answers. And he just took care of it, you know. He just took care of everything, and it was remarkable to watch. And then each one after, Easton he was in between. He was normal, though he was worried about reading, because he saw his brother who couldn't read. And I'd say, okay, Easton, listen, if your brother was learning to ride a bike and he only had 1 leg, it would be hard, right? You're seeing your brother, you've got both legs, okay? You don't have to worry. You can read. It's not hard. Don't make it into such a big thing, you know? So he struggled more just because he thought it was, you know? A lot has to do with the way we think about things, and he saw that. So anyway, and everyone had different ways that they memorize. Some, you know, the songs work. Some have, you know, just reading it over, like Dallas one time. Some just had to hear it. Tara had to write things out, like the multiplication tables. She had to write it out. And I thought by the time this was my 5th, I'm homeschooling, I had it down, but flashcards didn't work, you know, and nothing. And I don't know why I didn't go right away. I finally said, you know, I don't know what to do, Lord, what can I do? And then all of a sudden it kind of flashed in my mind that I think I did that when I was in, you know, private school. We had to write them out and turn them in. I think I remember doing that. And as soon as she did that, she had it, you know? So it's it's really remarkable and fun to be able to do that. But that's my experience. And then of course there's all the opposition. It's what about the social? There's so many facets to this, but I'll stop there because I think I covered everything, the 20 years, but I didn't homeschool all of, not well, I was pregnant with Macy and then all of them, but those three little ones were not being homeschooled, but they're not close enough together, I think, is part of the, and then for Dallas moving ahead so quickly. So yeah, that's the way it went.
But still 20 years of homeschooling, right?
Yeah. And you know what, I should do a caveat too, because when we moved to Missouri, and then the ministry was really what supported the family, or really our publishing, Narrow Publishing did. So I was more working at that time. I had trained Tyler to homeschool the three little ones. So she was kind of like, she was student teaching, and I would have her do. So, maybe that really wasn't me homeschooling. I do have video of me doing the homeschooling, and then I have video of her doing it. She remembers she did it all. I remember that I did it, it's just coming one thing. But anyway, but it was great because, she has three children of her own now, and she's homeschooled too. They were in school for a short amount of time, but primarily she's homeschooled, and they're in two of them are in high school now. So yeah. So it's a second generation. And I love seeing that,
Exactly, right? Seeing the second generation also homeschool. That's really such a blessing, because, then that they enjoyed the homeschooling and they know that it works because they do it for their children as well. So that's beautiful.
And again, they're going to always have their spouse, and they're back. So it's not always just a done thing, that they have this other influence. So I think for doing this, there's always going to be that. So I think it's just important, because if the mothers that are listening who want to homeschool and they're feeling overwhelmed because there's all these things coming against them, whether it's extended family, like I had a brother my sister-in-law, who's actually my 5th grade teacher, they're from a teaching family. And then when you homeschool, they're not happy, they're not happy at all. It's almost like you're questioning them, or you're ruining. He was the most vocal. You're ruining them. They're going to be freaks. He was really awful, saying all this stuff. But, and he never did come back, your children are so well versed, and they can talk to anybody. That's what I got from everyone, how sociable they were with every age, because it's not the peers, but whether they're older, very old, grandparent age, adults, they could speak to them without, with eye contact, interacting, asking questions, very respectful. All the way down to babies. Now, I'm sure a lot of that has to do with having a big family, because they had babies around, but it's not unique to our family, because I saw it in other homeschooling children, even if there were just an only child, I have a granddaughter, she's an only child, but again, she's fantastic with adults, with all the way down to babies. And it's just, I think there's just something very unique. There's an anointing, a blessing. I don't know, but it is a wonderful thing, because that's true being sociable, You're not going to get that with peers and what's going on in the school, especially with the bullying and all these different things. That's a whole other topic.
Yeah. So my son Owen is really a testimony of that, because when I started homeschooling him, so he, like Adina, I also have shared custody, so I don't have all the say over my children. And he had to see a psychiatrist for a short while. And the psychiatrist told me, he said, well, I can take him for tests and I can diagnose him, but tell me, will you treat him any differently if I diagnose him? I said, no, I won't. And he said, well, then let's not do it. I said, yes, I agree. Let's not do it. So never has that happened. But the thing is, when I started homeschooling him, He's not a child. He's not very sociable. He's not, he's a child of few words. But when he started homeschooling, my family started to see the difference in him immediately. On our next family gathering, my sisters were like, wow, this doesn't even seem like the same child. It looks like a different child. He's like where he would always be on his own, doing his own thing, not, being with the rest. He would sit with his aunts, which he never speaks to, right? He would sit with his aunts and he would chat with them and he would talk to them, and they couldn't believe the huge change in him. And I do believe, that homeschooling has a very big part in the change that happened in him. So
absolutely.
definitely,
I remember you sharing about that, and it just made me smile. I think a lot of times when children who need that nurturing and that protection, and children need nurturing and protection, they shouldn't be out there trying to fend for themselves. I mean, homegrown, which is, the ministry about growing your children at home in good soil, in, separate little pots, in greenhouses. That's where they're going to be able to get strong, not have to face the elements, because we know if that same plant was out in all these things coming against them, they could be damaged. They could stunt their growth emotionally, mentally, spiritually. So that's what God intended, for them to be nurtured. Here in the United States, like our founding fathers, which is, I'm sure you all know, George Washington and all those that created art, they never were schooled until like 12 years old. The boys would not be educated until they were 12 years old. That used to keep me going when I found that out with that. So, but, and then they were these amazing scholars. But I think that boys and girls need different things. You have one of each, both of you have one of each. So that their needs and the way that you educate them will be very different too. The boys need to be, they need more activity and moving around. I'll talk about that later if you're ever interested, because, schooling and being pinned in a seat, for that long is not normal for a child, and it's not going to help, but getting them up and moving periodically, and just not having that, they can just do better work and things. But anyway, finish saying, because I think it's fascinating.
Yes. So, but maybe I can just close us off with how I started homeschooling. So like with a lot of things that happened in my life, homeschooling started because of a mistake I made, which is how a lot of the things happens in my life.
I like that. Not just a crisis, but a mistake you made. I love that. I think that's so good to remember. Yeah.
Yes, so it wasn't just the crisis, it was a mistake that I made. So, but let me first start with where the desire came from to homeschool. I was, enjoyed going to work. I enjoyed sending my children to school. But then when I really met the Lord as my friend, I could see that school isn't doing for my children what I want my children to learn, things that comes from him. And there wasn't enough time for the children to go to school, come home, and me teach them the things, because I was working outside the house, came home at 5 in the evenings, and by then it's time to take the children. They do their homework, they take a bath, and they go into bed. So I could see that I didn't spend the time with my children that I wanted to spend with them. And I walked into Janine's office. We became friends, and I walked into Janine's office and I said, Janine, please let us pray. I want to work from home and I want to homeschool my children. And Janine, the sweetheart that she is, closed the door and she prayed for us. And I remember her saying afterwards, but she didn't say it then because, she probably felt it would hurt my feelings. But afterwards she said, you know what, Yvonne, when you walked out of that office, I said to myself, Lord, how's she going to think she's going to do this, So this isn't just about me, it's about her also seeing how, and I mean, we prayed there, we left it there, we never I don't even think we really spoke about it again, right? And then I got the opportunity, of course, through RMI to start working from home, but I didn't homeschool yet. And then, of course, COVID hit. But just before COVID hit us, my former husband said that he made a mistake and he wanted to come back. And instead of me saying, you know, like, well, just deal with what you need to deal with, and then we'll talk about it, you know, once you're divorced because you're a married man, I started becoming friends with him, which I wouldn't, um, uh, what's the word? Because he's married,
Advise. Yes.
advise.
Yes,
Yes, I
yes,
really
yes.
wouldn't advise it to anyone. But because I made the mistake, you know, which I shouldn't have, we became friends. And when COVID hit, I was homeschooling the children through COVID. And then afterwards, because of the businesses that took such a huge financial hit, their business took a financial hit. And there was this one day, and I never even suggested like Adina did. I never even suggested homeschooling because I knew it would be like, you know, it would be the most taboo thing to talk about because his mother-in-law, the children's stepmom's mother is a teacher. So of
There
course
you
that,
go.
you know,
Yes,
that would
that's
be like,
always the biggest opposition when
yes.
there's any
And that,
teachers around. Yes.
yes. And that was our biggest opposition in the end. But because, and then he suggested homeschooling, not because he wanted the children to homeschool, because it was the cheaper option at the time, right?
Well, that's always works with men, you know,
Yes,
the financial, the
exactly.
bottom line. So that's always a good, all the women, you know, all the moms listening should keep that in the back of their mind. Don't have a plan. He's got a plan, but
Yes.
it's a possibility that the money card might play a role.
So I, like Adina, I almost fell on my back, you know, my jaw dropped. I couldn't believe he was even suggesting it. But before he could take back his words, I was like, yes, 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 let's start, let's homeschool. And it was actually at the end of the school year that he suggested it. And so it was just fine. So in 2021, I started homeschooling the children, and it was just the most fun. I must say, you know, it's hard work, but it was the most fun that I've ever had in my whole life, is homeschooling my two children, you know. And it was just, and like I said, so what was strange, that my brothers and sisters, none of them said anything when I said I'm going to homeschool the children. They all were a little concerned about the social, you know, the social thing.
Yes, everybody
Will the
is.
children be social? But I think after we came out of COVID, you know, it was like everyone was home, so it wasn't a big deal. And my sisters were all behind me 100%. The only opposition that we really got was from the mother-in-law, from his mother-in-law, that was saying, you know, I don't think it's a good idea. Yvonne doesn't have what it takes to be a teacher. She won't know what to teach the children, because remember, they don't know me, right? So they're making all of these judgments about me without really knowing who I am. But I don't think any mom should say that, you know, because each mom is equipped to teach their own children.
Yes.
Because the Lord equips them to teach their own children.
Yes.
And so
that is a big thing we should talk about either now or later, but so many are either they're challenged by it, or they feel like I wasn't a good student. But almost every homeschool mother said their education really began when they became their children's teacher, you know, because you get to, and things that I couldn't do. One of the concerns I had, like geography and history, I was horrible at it, but I just had to stay one day ahead of them, you know? And then once they can educate themselves, once they get to a certain level, they go off and they just do it. That's the thing. That's what you want to teach them, to be good learners. But all of them can do it. And I even had a lady who didn't know how to read and learned right along with her children, just a day ahead. And she learned to read because she wanted to homeschool her children, you know, and she just stayed and her education really began, you know, because she was completely uneducated. But we're adults, and things that we're difficult for me when I was in elementary school. History was so easy, but in my head, and when I was a child, it was difficult.
Yes.
But we're adults and we can learn things so much more quickly, and and so that should never be a deterrent either, because they can.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with that. There's a lot of things when it came to homeschooling that I didn't know. But as an adult, I didn't realize how much I learned while homeschooling my children. It was like I learned so much, and not just learning in the sense of what was in the books, but there would sometimes be something, and I would be like, wow, this is interesting. Let's do some further research on this. And then it would take us down I almost want to say a rabbit hole where we would discuss it and we would make a whole, and it's those things that the children remember afterwards. It's those
and
things that
you're
really,
instilling that for them for their whole lives.
yes.
That's what when my son Cooper, when he's talking about stuff, he does that all the time. He still, because he had such a good start, he goes and reads this, and that leads to reading this, and that leads to reading this. And he's so well versed, but he wouldn't have gotten that had he been, in a regular one. We haven't heard from you, Adina. Is that the same with you? Have you found that you're learning at the same time? I mean, you're pretty well educated though, so maybe it's not the same for you.
Yeah, I do find that it's easier for me now than when I was in school. Understanding the things now, I think it's also because we are more mature and we have the guidance of our beloved. And if I just ask him, okay, just help me to remember this so I can explain this to them. Because I've been at how many years back that I was at school, I'm not young anymore.
Yeah, let's not make the sums, right? Let's not count it up.
No, I don't want to count it up. It's so long ago. And you just brought up something is so good. How can I teach this to them? Do you know, he knows what will click with each one of them. Do you know, that's so phenomenal. That's like something so unique to parents that are just not homeschool parents, but they have a relationship, with the Lord. And if they don't, they can get one through this, just asking God for wisdom. How do I teach this? And it's not going to be one blanket thing. It's going to vary depending on what you're going to try and teach them. And just like I mentioned with Tara, how do I get this, and I don't know why I didn't go sooner. That's always my question to myself. Why didn't you just ask right away? It would have saved so much time, but I think going through the struggles, helps us to relate to those that are struggling. But that's a huge thing that we have that's unique to us, as believers, as his bride, as him having as a best friend. You can talk to the person who knows what's inside of them and what's going to click with them. And it could be something, it normally is, I'm sure you found out, something you would never have guessed, you couldn't have come up with it.
And I just want to also mention that my whole family is teachers.
So you really have, okay, so you have a whole team coming against. And so now what are their, I'm going to share with you, because at the end of everything, but tell me what you think as far as, what kind of opposition and what are they thinking now? Do they have do you get the same opposition? I think it's important to.
At the beginning,
it depends.
I got a lot of opposition from them because my nephew and my niece are both high school, secondary school teachers.
That's probably where you get the most pushback, because when they're younger, they think they know everything.
Yes,
it's not till we get older we know nothing. I'm going to be 70. I know nothing, absolutely nothing. The older I get, the more I know. You don't know anything.
they really questioned me a lot, but I think
Mm.
when they found out that the curriculum we are following do include formal assessments, I think that was what they were most worried about.
Right.
But when they found out that there is formal assessments and exams that gets formally assessed, then they were more
Yeah,
at
so
peace
you're
with
not
it.
going to have that as far because you are being graded and tested. So there's
Yeah.
going to be proof. In my situation, and most homeschool in the United States, they don't have that. There are some states that you have to take the test. That was one of the reasons we were going to move to the Ozarks, and on the map, it also is in the state of Arkansas. They had testing, but I didn't want to move there and have to, even though it was only the testing, if I'm not teaching them what they want, then how can they be tested properly, you know? And I didn't want to teach what they wanted me to teach them. I wanted to teach them what I believed is things as an adult. What did I wish I knew? What do I, what's going to help them in their spiritual walk, all of these things, and just make them a very well-rounded, well-read, an intelligent adult. That's what I wanted, and I knew that the school system, even I went through private school. I did do some public school. I went all the way through, one class short of getting a higher degree, but it kept me humble. So I can say without a doubt, it helped me when I was speaking. No, I don't have a degree, I could brag about that, boast about that I didn't have a degree. But I think that is one. So there's going to be that opposite. Then you're going to really, because at least, at least they have that, or, and also you're highly educated. You have an education yourself. So some have greater challenges. You have enough already, God knows. So I'm not minimizing. It's just in this homeschool realm and with the teachers, but it's good that and these discussions, I think it's good that those nieces and nephews, right? Did you say nieces and nephews? Niece and nephew, that you have these discussions, and I think that also knowing the opposition in that and in social and things, and I don't know how much longer this is supposed to last, but even if this is just in closing, the one it's in first where it goes through, about wives and when without a word, and it goes on. But if you continue on through that, it says always being ready. Do you remember that one?
Yes.
Always being ready to give an account to anyone who asks, of the hope that's in you, yet with gentleness and reverence. I think always being prepared. If you're thinking about homeschooling, you are homeschooling, you're going to get this opposition, and it's rather than facing those things and not having an answer or trying to explain yourself or trying to defend yourself. Of course, defending ourselves is the worst thing you can do. Is go to him ahead of time. That's one of the things that I did with Tara, because knowing she was not going to she did not want anything to do with college. She didn't want to take one course of that. And that was shocking. Besides the fact, I'm never going to date. So you got two, like, what's your problem? How do you expect to do this? But I said wisely, thankfully, I said, ask him what you should say. And that led to all sorts of wonderful opportunities for her to share her testimony. I think the most stunning and incredible was when they asked her about, and it was a group of Japanese, and it was at a university, and they were teachers at university and asking her about why, and they were just in awe of her. In awe. And yet, and this is this whole society, that whole nation is so about that. And it would only be possible. And of course, every time you open your mouth to share, remember he says, don't worry about what you're going to say, so you have that first line, that first thing that he says, being ready to say. And so, and I don't remember what, but she would just say that. And then it would just go on to all these different things and questions. But he was always speaking through her. And in the end, held in very high esteem. Now that's definitely God, but mothers need to be prepared too. And what are you going to do about the social? And I thought, if you ask him ahead of time to be prepared for that, because I'm a firm believer in doing different outside activities and things like that, which you have that opportunity to do whatever you want. You know, they can take all sorts of class where you can meet, you know, other kids your age and interact with them, and because you have more time and things. So speaking of time, I don't know how much time we have because I'm not watching.
Well, that was actually a very nice closing for us for this podcast. Thank you both. And in the end, I think what we're also trying to say is that each of you listening, when he's put the desire in your heart to homeschool your children, your journey will be different than ours. It won't be the same as ours. In the end, he'll be the one that makes the way. He'll be the one, the Lord will be the one that would help you along the way. And then you'll be sitting here having a wonderful podcast telling us of how he did it for you. So I think all of us are out so excited to hear your testimony on how he did it for you. Adina, do you have any closing words for us? And then Erin, I'm going to go to you, and then we're going to close off our podcast. Thank you so much. Adina, do you have anything for us?
I would just say, like, with my journey, you know, this is, and also, like you said, if he puts the desire in your heart, you know, this is something you have to trust in, especially like in my case and Yvonne in your case, where you do not have full authority or, you know, with custody arrangements to make these decisions on your own. It's just to give it to your beloved Lord and trust him. He will make a way, just like he did, you know, for me and for Yvonne and for everyone else to homeschool. We just have to trust him with that. That's all I can say.
Thank you so much, Adina. Erin, do you have any closing words for us?
Yes, I think just pulling some of the things that each of you had said, you know, whether it's a mistake you made, a crisis, letting him do it. If you have opposition, it looks like it's not going to happen, whatever it is, those are all good things. You know, you have to look at, in every of those bad things, he's in that, and that's how he's going to work. And you're in a better position is if you're free to you're a single parent and your children's father doesn't care and you're doing it. It seems like an easier road, but if you have that opposition, which most do from different outside sources, or even in yourself, you're not sure whether you can do it, you're in a good position because you can do it with him. And if he wants it, I think that was one of the first things that you said, Adina, if you want this to happen, you have to make it happen. I think we should be doing that in everything, right? You know, if you want this, make it happen. And I mean, it was just thrown on me. I never even thought of it when it happened. I never thought about homeschooling. I never considered it. I didn't have any part of it. And also, if you have to wait, that's a good thing. Now doing the children's books and the superpower of waiting is a great thing. It's better to wait and let him do it in his time than to do it prematurely, like a premature birth, you know? It's a big struggle, and it could be a struggle the whole time. So if you have to wait and you're still waiting for God to move on you being able to homeschool, it's been in your heart for a while, you're in a really good spot, because once it happens, it's just going to be beautifully done, and you'll be able to watch it and have just a wonderful testimony on waiting too. Even though I didn't have to do that, I have to do it on a lot of things, not in this, but that's a good thing too for those who are listening too.
Yes. Yeah. So thank you so much for joining us, Erin and Adina. Thank you for the podcast. Ladies, this is the first in a series of Encouraging Women podcasts, and we would love to have you here for our next episode. And thank you so much for being here and for listening. You can let us know if there's anything that you want us to talk about, and we'll have guests over. I am very excited to see what will happen in the future with this podcast. So ladies, enjoy your day and we'll talk again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.